I'm Greg Thomas from Genesys, and on this episode of Level Up CX Live, we're joined by Peter Graf, our Senior Vice President of Strategy, and we're going to talk about the experience economy. We're going to talk about the need to focus on delivering empathetic experiences and how having a framework to guide this journey is so critical. Peter Graf, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me, Greg.
So let's start with this notion of a shift to loyalty and delivering more empathetic experiences and why that matters. You know, there's been this long-standing focus, perhaps rightly so, on efficiency in business, but what's changing and why is that model no longer fit for purpose?
Yeah. So first off, there's nothing wrong with efficiency. Efficiency is great and we need to continue,
says the German,
to drive efficiency, says the German. But what's really happened is that companies understand in this day and age, people compare their experience with the best experience they've ever had. And it's not enough just to focus as a business on your internal efficiencies. I know that most people who run contact centers have a budget and they have to hit this budget and they have to be very careful about how they are using their folks, their people. And that's been the primary push for the last, let's say, 30 years since Genesys is around to help companies drive that efficiency. But something's shifted. Digital technology, innovation, AI, you and I using things like ChatGPT and others is driving a comparison of what the experiences is with the businesses that consumers work with and the experiences they have with technologies elsewhere. And what happens is that the stakes are being raised. Consumers come in and say, look, I understand you want to be efficient, but I need you to be more empathetic to my needs, not just optimize your own efficiency. I want you to solve my problem in a way that I understand what you're talking about. You need to resolve the root cause, right? Don't make this problem come back when we've solved it. All of that kind of stuff. I don't want you to waste my time. You need to connect the dots. You need to make sense of this. It has to be frictionless. Treat it right. If I'm getting angry, I don't want you to fuel the fire. You have to work with me. And the point is, humans can do all of these things, and AI can do all of these things as well. And that's what's changing. And that's where it's not only a discussion about efficiency. Now, if we use AI to deliver experiences that are effective, efficient, and emotionally intelligent from a consumer's point of view, we earn their trust, we earn their loyalty, we can drive revenue and build up our brands.
Yeah, and I think that shift, right, as you described it, to really focusing on make it empathetic for the consumer, for the customer, see it from their point of view, that's a big shift.
That's right.
So talk a bit more about this crisis of loyalty and this mismatch, if you will, between what consumers want and what businesses are offering, and what organizations need to do to respond to that shift.
So our industry has been very much focused on metrics. We love our AHT and our average handling time, our first contact resolution, our after call work.
We love our three-letter acronyms.
We love our three-letter acronyms. What's happening is a growing understanding that agentic AI allows us to think about outcomes. Not the metrics that measure the experience, but the outcome. What is the cost per outcome? What does it cost me to onboard a customer? What does it cost me to change an address for a customer? But also around the loyalty. So how much revenue can I avoid losing by creating more loyalty? And so once that's established, and by the way, frankly, more often than not, loyalty has a much bigger lever than efficiency. Many companies are attacking it in the way that they say, all right, there are processes where we can use AI to drive additional operational efficiency. And that could be, for example, we're doing account management better. We're helping people find information more easily, all those kind of things. But every industry has a couple of experiences that really are loyalty makers or breakers. And that's where companies are investing often first to deliver the next level. Here's an example. If you're a healthcare provider, and your billing is off, that's where you break the promise. If there's a surprise bill. If you're an insurance and your claims process is not up to par, that's where you break the promise to the customer. They hired you for that moment, and if you do not deliver on that experience at that time, that's causing trouble. If you're a retailer and your returns process doesn't work, you're breaking trust, because I bought this believing I can bring it back if it doesn't work. Yeah. And every industry has these types of processes. That's where attention goes first, very often, if they understand the power of loyalty in addition to continuing to drive efficiency.
Yeah, and I love those examples, because I think if I think about the most general definition of what a brand is, right? It's a promise. It's an emotional attachment to a company. And when the company doesn't live up to that, it's a relationship, and the relationship feels like it's been broken or squandered. Trust has been lost. And so I think that's a really good way to think about why this is so important. So the last time we had you on here, we talked a bit about the levels of experience orchestration, which we had just introduced. We've heard a lot about it here at Experience. So it's a strategic framework, a maturity model that helps customers understand where they are in delivering more AI-powered and orchestrated experiences. Can you, and if you haven't seen this, folks, there's a lot on our website. You can go and dig into this. But can you sketch for the folks who are watching now, just like briefly, what the levels are so people can get grounded in it, and then we'll continue the conversation?
Certainly, but let me take the opportunity just to plug this, because otherwise I'll forget it. On our corporate website, Genesys.com, if you go to resources and blogs, there is a great blog that Tony and I co-authored on the levels. And so anyone who wants this in writing, that's the way.
And we can actually put a link to that below the stream.
Fantastic. So the levels. Let's start by understanding what experience orchestration actually is. Most people think, oh, AI, that's automation. It's not right. Automation is one aspect of experience orchestration. So how can I actually use AI to help consumers self-serve? And that has obvious benefits to the consumer, because it's more efficient. The other angle of orchestration is augmentation. So how can I support my employees with technology that makes them more efficient, that makes them more informed, that makes them better partners for the consumers that are calling in? Solving problems, creating loyalty.
And they can stay in the moment with that consumer.
Exactly. Now, baked into this is personalization. And that's a very broad term to talk about context, connecting the dots, right? Not wasting time, all of that kind of stuff, but also, respecting my preferences, things like that. So personalization. And the last piece is optimization. And personalization to optimization is like going and using a navigational system to drive through the city. That's personalization, while optimization would be to look at the Google Maps during rush hour and see the city with all the red and yellow streets, so you can have a vantage point and actually optimize all experiences at the same time. Things like journey management, AI, continuous AI forecasting, and. Those are the four aspects. Now, when you go through the levels, these aspects all change on a continuous basis. So level 0, okay, everything's manual. Level 1, automation is essentially IVRs. Augmentation is a screen pop, right? Personalization doesn't really happen other than you find the right agents who has the skills that you can, so that for that queue, they can help you. Optimization is, training people better. And so as we move on, level 1 is usually done in voice. People who are on premise, I usually joke when I talk about the levels for people on premise, I say that's the end of the presentation for you. Because level 2 embraces the cloud, uses predefined dialogue automation, agent assist. You have predictive routing, so early AI coming in, and optimization happens through WEM and other capabilities. So that's level 2. Most of our customers are in level 1 and level 2. And sometimes they're in level 1 for voice and in level 2 for their digital channels. Now, level 3 introduces generative AI, so now we're talking about generated dialogues. And so that's where you have the co-pilots coming in, automation empowered by generative AI, not level 4 rationalization, reasoning, memory, planning, acting, because level 4, and that's what Genesys is operating at right now, that's the agentic experience generation. And now we're using all the technology that we've talked about for the last 2 days to actually create autonomy in the way how the system operates with human oversight. And then at level 5, universal agentic orchestration is happening when you have more proactive capabilities. So you have personal virtual concierges that are helping consumers to be proactive about their needs with a brand. It's all about having these A2A, agent-to-agent collaboration of agentic AIs, maybe even across brands. And just a much higher level of optimization of AI towards outcomes with more autonomy to operate.
Right.
So it's a continuation of capabilities. Most importantly, every time you level up, you're adding value to the company. And so we have tons of value calculators and things like that where people can find out.
And that's actually what I wanted to ask you about next, because I think what's so useful about the levels as a framework is it not only allows people to see where am I at different points in my experience, as you said, voice versus digital, for example, but it gives an ability now to think about how am I unlocking more value as I sort of traverse the levels and bring more AI into the mix and along those 4 dimensions you were talking about. So, you know, we did a recent survey and 92% of CX and IT leaders told us that it's important to figure out how are we going to really get ROI on these investments we're making in AI. So talk about how leveling up, not necessarily the framework, but the notion of leveling up delivers more value, and how does that tie back to this notion of loyalty and building on that as well?
Right. So first of all, let's talk about efficiency, because like everyone's comfortable with that conversation. As you level up, 2 things are happening. With every level, AI becomes more capable and you can automate more conversations. That actually helps you have people shift focus and not do the repetitive, easy stuff, but focus on the more difficult things. But overall, that helps you to have higher levels of service, and that automation is actually delivering savings. You do not need human agents for that work.
Right.
That's one way of thinking about it. That creates value. The other way is for the people who do work at your organization, you can now use AI to make them more efficient. So while automation can take a whole bunch of conversations and just take care of those, the people will be able to handle more conversations per year, or at least you will not need more people, because since the easy stuff gets automated, the hard stuff is left with the people. So you have that ability to continue to drive that value. So automation, augmentation, drive value around efficiency. Personalization, optimization, as obviously help, but that's a good framework how to think about it. On the loyalty side, it gets more interesting, because nobody owns, or loyalty is owned very high up in the organization. Like if you think about Genesys, our customer success officer, who is a member of the senior leadership team, he's the one who owns loyalty, right?
Right.
He will say everybody owns loyalty, but what I'm trying to say is that's not a normal way how people in a contact center environment usually think and usually deliver ROI. However, if you do the math, and I've done lots of math around this, you take a $3 billion company, about 1,000 agents, you take automation from 30 to 60%. So you used to be able to do 30% self-service now of your conversations, now it's 60. You believe that's an amazing value, and it's about $22 million in efficiency savings if you assume average salary in the US. Fine. You can actually get to $23 million just increasing customer loyalty by 3%. So 30% efficiency gain in the contact center versus 3% retention of customer, or 3% avoided churn. That delivers about $24 million. So just to give you a little bit of a perspective, even tiny lifts in loyalty can have such a huge impact. The problem is we're not used in our industry to think that way. And this event has been an invitation to broaden that horizon. Loyalty is a huge value lever. You can articulate it as brand value, your ability to upsell and cross-sell, or just avoid losing profit for customers who jump ship.
Yeah, because losing customers is expensive, but getting new customers, right, is also very expensive. And I like the metaphor of it being a lever, right, because it does have that sort of force multiplying effect loyalty does.
That's right.
Yeah. So let's shift the conversation a little bit to agentic AI. You know, arguably the biggest development of the past year, at least in the AI space. We've heard a lot about it here today. We've heard a lot about it at the conference in general. Why is it so important? Like, what does it mean for CX, and how does it help organizations get to the next level? Because we all know that there's a lot of conversation happening in the marketplace about agentic. Most of those conversations are probably not about truly agentic systems.
Yeah.
So how is agentic different, and why does it matter?
So, as Glenn said so nicely this morning, it's probably one of the most overhyped terms ever. But
Agentic AI has a good agent. It's getting hyped
that's
very
right.
well.
That's right. That's right. But for us to understand how it's fundamentally different is all the other levels from 0 to 3, it was, very deterministic what's going to happen. It was always pre-thought. Actions were taken because they were triggered by humans. Integration is difficult, right? Silos everywhere. That's the world that we come from. The promise or the premise of agentic AI is to use AI to reason, to plan, to consider different options, and to take action. And that last taking action changes everything, because in the past, humans took action. They were supported by AI, or we defined a flow that we trusted enough to put it in front of a customer for self-service. Now AI can take action, and that is a very different premise, because now it's not about putting compliance in the process. It's about creating the guardrails and the infrastructure, so AI can actually take these actions in an environment where the outcome can be trusted.
Right.
And so agentic AI is delivering this, or unleashing this new opportunity to create efficiencies, because it's not only about creating content anymore, it's about taking action, even taking proactive action. And that has a lot of promise, and that will drive a lot of change.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that Glenn mentioned in his keynote this morning was the notion of these systems are becoming more autonomous. You mentioned that earlier, right? And so yes, they operate within guardrails, but they can take those actions on their own within this framework towards some specified outcome, right? And
That's
so
exactly
when you
right.
think about those 4 dimensions, right,
Yeah.
it allows for just, if you'll pardon the pun, a leveling up of the way that we deliver customer experience.
That's right, Greg. But if I may add, I don't believe in a future where we flip a switch and we go from humans run the show to AI runs the show. What's going to happen, in our opinion, is that you will move from using AI as tools to moving AI as a member of your team. And that member of the team is acting with autonomy. Now, that means we're going to have mixed teams between agentic AI agents and human agents, between agentic AI and employees in a broader sense that work as a team. They need to be onboarded together. They need to be upskilled together. Performance needs to be managed. We need to decide when to decommission an agentic AI. All of these processes that were used to run for people, we will need to run holistically across people and AI.
Yeah, and other aspects, right? Like, as an employee, there are policies that I must follow, right?
Correct.
And the agentic AI is going to have a similar thing. Like,
Yeah.
what are the things I can do? What can I not do? What data do I have access to?
But imagine you're changing policy, for example. You need to not only train your AI, you also need to train your people. And that will deliver a different level of how they work together.
Yeah. It's such an interesting threshold of really delivering not only that greater efficiency that we started with, but loyalty, that these systems are better at delivering outcomes to customers, if they're better at delivering outcomes to the business. then that's going to engender more loyalty. It's going to help me to bring it back to something you said earlier, Peter, that how do we make these experiences empathetic from the customer's point of view? And if the system can solve these challenges on my behalf in a way that meets me where I am, like how does that not help me feel more loyal to that brand?
Exactly.
Yeah. So
and everything is designed from a consumer's perspective, right?
Right. So for folks who are on this journey and maybe they're thinking about how they bring in more AI-powered capabilities, maybe they're thinking about how they can better articulate the business value or that ROI we talked about with our CX investments, what advice would you have for folks who are watching about how they should level up?
I get this question a lot, and it's always a great conversation to have with customers. They're looking for someone who can advise them that they trust on what's important on the journey, and it usually comes down to three things. The first one is to making sure your data and knowledge bases are straightened out. Specifically in knowledge bases, there's a lot of documentation that people have to read when they're onboarding. Sometimes it's conflicting. Data sitting in different places, sometimes it's conflicting. So taking care of data and knowledge is an important path, and many companies are actually using AI to help with that process.
Yeah.
So
and I think that's also one where there is a bit of a market difference between an AI and a human. A human can quickly scan something and know, oh, that's out of date, that's not right, where the AI is going to somewhat take it as gospel, right? So you've got to clean it up.
Got to clean that up. So many customers start from a data and knowledge angle. The second aspect is that executive buy-in and the level of change management this requires cannot be underestimated. So, who will be affected across the organization? This is not just a contact center conversation. This bleeds into sales, it bleeds into marketing, bleeds into fulfillment, logistics, whatever there is. So it's a decision that is higher up in the organization, and it's about bringing them in, committing to doing the work of change management with the people affected. It needs to be explained, the benefit needs to be clear, and it also needs to be clear that it will make work more interesting, right?
Right.
So those two things out of the way, it comes to how do we prioritize our experiences? I alluded to this a little bit at the beginning. Understanding, am I doing this to drive efficiency? Am I doing this to drive loyalty? And for which type of use case am I really empathizing what? Move away from this idea of, I'm going to buy a co-pilot, or I'm going to buy a conversational AI. That is the wrong perspective. Let's think about claims processing and how you use automation and augmentation, how you optimize that process, how do you personalize this? That's the way to think about it. How do you not drop the ball at that process that is inherent to your brand promise, right? Yeah. And so those are like the three things: data, understanding the level of change management is required, finding the right experiences, and then obviously, and that's the advertising plug, use Genesys Cloud as your strategic orchestration platform to pull it all together.
Yeah, well, and I think it's a really important point, because if we're truly thinking about changing from an orientation of a contact center or a call center, if we're thinking about changing from containment and average handle time to, no, I want to deliver a better customer experience across all the touch points to better not only serve the customer and be more efficient internally, but to build that kind of loyalty. Yeah. How can you do it with a bunch of point?
And it's cost per outcome. If I need to spend $10 more to save a customer from canceling the contract when that customer creates $1,000 profit a year, I'm going to spend these $10 all day long, right? Yeah. So it's about understanding the value that these experiences bring to you and looking at it from a consumer perspective.
Yeah, I love that. We could talk about this all day. But that is sadly all the time we have. So Peter Graf, thank you so much for joining us on Level Up CX today and sharing your experience, your expertise, your insights with us and with the audience. Thanks to all of you who are joining as well. If you'd like to learn more about the topic, including the blog that Peter alluded to earlier, there are links down below. And also just be sure to follow Genesys on LinkedIn. You can hear about the next episode of Level Up CX Live. And until then, from experience, I'm Greg Thomas and Peter Graf. Thanks for watching.